Welcome back to another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast. I'm your host, Richie O'Leary, and joined today, my co-host of sorts for today, I should say. That rhymed. That was kind of corny. Zach Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions podcast. Zach, how's it going?
Hey, it could be better, right? We just had what happened at yesterday's media availability, but all things are great, and I'm happy to be back on the podcast, Richie.
Yeah, I appreciate always having you on. Before we even get started into that, that's what we're going to discuss first is the, I don't even know how you describe it, just the media availability situation, I guess. We'll put it like
Tension?
that. Yeah. So I'm gonna play the video real quick from I think it's from John Sauber. I don't know how to pronounce
Sauber.
it.
Yep, John Sauber.
Okay, so I was slightly right. So I'm gonna play the clip. I think it's only 30 seconds long. So let's pull this up real quick. If it's too loud, it might be too loud. Just tell me.
Guys, how we doing? Good. This is obviously a serious and sensitive subject. I know Greg read that, but we haven't heard anything from you on this.
John, we released the university statement. All right, do I need to read the statement again?
If you would like.
All right. Regarding the two former Penn State football players, we released a statement yesterday, and our program and athletic department will have no further comment. If you need the statement, please reach out to me or Chris.
Hey guys, any questions?
There was a good point in the summer for you where these guys were not going to be on the team.
Again, guys, the university already released a statement. If you need the statement, reach out to me or Chris. We'll have no further comment.
All right, so you got the basis of that.
Yeah.
What are your just, I guess, initial reaction thoughts to that one?
Well, I was there, right?
Yeah. So what was the feeling, I guess, like among the room after that?
I mean, I still have goosebumps from it, right? Watching it back, just kind of tension doesn't even begin to describe what had happened there. Yeah. It didn't feel genuine at all across the board. And I'll get into specifics a little more. But if you're asking about the honest feeling of it from my point of view, tense, and I knew it was coming. I absolutely knew that it was coming. And I knew that, and I didn't expect James to even say no comment. So did it play out the exact way that I thought it would? No, but it certainly played out a way that I didn't think it would go off track like that. I really thought that James was just going to sit there at the mic and just basically glare, like just stare and just not say a word, or point over to the SIDs, either Greg or Chris. So this happened the way it did. It like I said, it got out of control, but this is kind of more or less how I figured the exchange would go. Maybe a little less tension, but here we are.
Well, I mean, I feel like we knew this was going to come out as soon, or be asked about as soon as this report came out earlier this week.
Yeah. That's why that's why they had the prepared statement, right?
Exactly. Correct.
What, did they not know that questions weren't going to be asked? And look, I'm not trying to implicate myself or any other journalists.
No.
And I'm not trying to point the finger at John and Audrey. But I knew if those questions were going to be asked, it was going to be asked by one of them, if not both of them, and it was going to be asked right away at the beginning. So this, like I said, this did not go past my expectations. This is kind of what I thought was going to unfold to an extent.
The craziest thing to me, and I know we just talked about it off pod, but I want to talk about it on pod too, is that I know they read this, or the kid asked the question, or maybe it was John that asked the question originally.
John asked first, and then Audrey followed up with more of a direct question.
They came to statement, and then they're like, we're not answering questions on it. Then Audrey asked, and I'm just sitting there kind of like, come on, like, we just heard this statement. Like, he just said he's not talking about it. Like, why are we asking this question again? What are we doing here? It's just kind of crazy to me. And I love Audrey. I think she does pretty solid work, or I shouldn't even say pretty solid, pretty good work. Above average.
I mean, she writes for the New York Times, for crying out loud. There's a reason she is in her position, because she is a high quality journalist. Like, you don't get that job by accident.
No. It's just mind boggling to me. Why are you asking it again after they just said they're not going to do it?
I have a reasonable explanation. Look, I've never been in that position.
Of course.
Who knows if I'm ever going to write for that kind of, like, that top of a publication. But I'm not speaking on behalf of me, though. But I understand after interning at different local newspapers, interning at TV stations, that Audrey is a staff writer. Okay.
Yeah.
She is not an editor. She's not a publisher. She is the staff writer for Penn State's coverage via the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
If I know anything about my past experience, not comparable to hers, but if I know anything from what I've learned is that when you are, and this goes the same thing for TV journalists, you have an assignment. You have direction. You have orders from a managing editor from a publication that is very, very powerful. So Audrey didn't just wake up and say, you know, I'm going to charge in at James Franklin regardless of what any statement or anything happens to begin with. She is answering to an editor and a publisher that are probably saying, you have a story, you have a deadline, you need to ask a question. We might not necessarily anticipate an answer. They probably didn't expect one, but you have to ask the question. That is your job. Now let's flip it over from Penn State's point of view. This is a very serious legal proceeding. Yeah. And I'm going to throw in allegedly because, right? So
it still is. Yeah.
Right. It's everything is alleged, right? But this is still a serious ongoing legal matter. So if I'm tentative to speak on the case myself as a Penn State podcast host that doesn't have as many consequences as a university, a head coach of a major football program, SIDs who all make way more money than me and have a bigger persona. So that's what I'm saying. I get why Audrey asked the question, and same with John. They have editors that they report to. Same thing with James Franklin and Penn State University. They are going off of direction, I'll say allegedly in this case too, from lawyers. I think, this is my opinion, I am not reporting this, but I imagine that lawyers that they are working with closely said it is better to not say anything outside of a pre-published statement that we have made. And I will leave it at that. Do I think, again, I'll go back to the point, Richie, where I said it didn't feel genuine. Did James Franklin need to, rush away from the microphone? No, he didn't. I didn't think that was genuine. He could have literally turned and said, and pointed a hindsight's 2020. I've never been in that position where I'm behind a microphone with a cluster of news reporters or talk show hosts or anything where they're peppering me with questions. I've never been in that situation. Could it have been handled better? Absolutely. Hindsight is 2020. But you have to understand that there are more powerful people and smarter people that are controlling or dictating the situation, if you will.
Yeah, I will say that I know since it is an ongoing investigation still, like any statement he makes, it's admissible in the court proceeding. Like he will get subpoenaed immediately. So it is better not to answer those questions, I would say, at this point in time, given everything's still ongoing. The only thing is, like you mentioned, I feel like he handled that situation a little weirdly. Like you should have just said, like, "Hey, man, next question."
It wasn't genuine. It was not genuine, and I feel again, and from Audrey's point of view, John asked the question first, and he got told the same thing. Yes. We'll read the statement. So it's not like if Audrey had asked first, like I was there. So at the beginning, before the press conference even started, before James Franklin even showed up, the statement was read.
Okay.
That same SID came over before the cameras were even turned on and read the statement word for word and then said, we will have no further comment, and basically alluding, do not ask, without saying it directly. And then John followed up, and then Audrey followed up. So there was almost a three-part thing, and we only know about the first, like the general public for the most part only knows about the first two parts of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even know that, to be honest with you. Well, I wasn't there. You were there. But yeah, no, it's. I don't agree with asking the question afterwards. It is what it is. But the Franklin walking off twice, it's like, all right, you walk off once, like, all right, whatever. I did something stupid. I walked off. Walk off again. It's like, come on, what are we doing? Stop walking off. Just point to the SID and he'll read it again, or that's it. Like basically, or just saying next question. Who's next? Next. Done. Like I thought. It could have, like you said, it wasn't genuine. Could have been handled better, but I guess it is what it is.
I feel like there were some theatrics to it across the board, and this, again, James Franklin could have handled it better. Audrey Snyder could have handled it better. I don't. It's obviously a very serious situation across the board. Yeah. I really don't have much more than that. What I will say is this is what Penn State is probably going to impose stricter restrictions, if you will.
Yep.
They are probably, and maybe I'm giving them advice that they didn't even think, but they've had right there. They had these discussions after the whole thing took place, the event took place. Is that when they say that, they're probably going to, I wouldn't be surprised if they say, we will revoke credentials if you do not follow instructions. And that's kind of where we are to this point. So they're going to say, if we release a statement or if we have a directive and you don't follow it, you are going to be asked to leave but maybe not revoke credentials. Maybe that's a little too much, but maybe you have to leave the media scrum, or maybe you have to leave the press conference.
Yeah.
And then you essentially get a warning, a second warning, and then, all right, now your credentials in. And I'm not trying to imply that that's the right move, but I would not be surprised if Penn State decides to do that.
I would not be shocked either, but I feel like that's enough on this topic. It is what it is. There's not really much else you could say about it.
Well, it's been taken by almost every major voice in the sports world. Ian Rappaport commented about it, NFL Network reporter, insider, right? It's ESPN, one of the top headlines on ESPN today. So it's certainly, it's not just inside of the Happy Valley bubble. It's reaching, and I wonder, well, we're going to talk about Wisconsin. So I wonder, I don't think the players are going to have an issue with it, but James Franklin and the coaching staff, right? This is a negative media spotlight in front of a big game. And we've noticed that doesn't really mix together very well. Yes. When the negative media spotlight plus Penn State, a quality Penn State football team do not mix well together.
Now, that being said, Wisconsin this weekend, I'm indifferent on this team. They started out so poorly. They lost QB1. They lost RB1. Mm-hmm. Now they're kicking on all cylinders a little bit. So it is a little bit of an interesting matchup. And Camp Randall is not an easy place to play by any means.
Well, you can comment on it best because you know Rutgers just as well as Penn State. You're a Rutgers insider too, simultaneously. So I see from the outside, like, hey, Rutgers probably isn't as good as everybody anticipated. They're banged up. I don't think it's their fault, but they have lost so many key players. And I thought they were, they're kind of one or two injuries away from really this system falling apart for this season. And that's happened. Northwestern doesn't play complimentary football, and Purdue's just bad. Like, they are the worst team. They are the worst team in the Big Ten Conference and one of the worst teams
Power 4, Power 5.
In Power 4, exactly. So Wisconsin is hot. Wisconsin is peaking. I'm not saying that those wins don't matter. Like, you can take that and build some confidence and build some momentum, and then you feel like you can take on the world. So wins are wins, but Wisconsin is also playing very favorable matchups. Let's take an actual tangible game you can look at, Richie. USC. Wisconsin went out to Los Angeles and lost that game 38-21. Penn State went out to Los Angeles and won that game 33-30 in overtime. That's, give or take, a 20-point, margin. So Penn State at this point with a comparable team, and USC had relatively the same players available. Maybe one guy was missing. Maybe one second or third string player was missing. But it wasn't a quarterback, a running back, wide receivers, defensive linemen, linebackers, right? The nucleus of USC was present for Wisconsin and Penn State. So Penn State, right now, based on that one game, is 20 points better than Wisconsin.
That's an interesting point there. The past 3 games that they have played, like you said, Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern, they're all really not that good.
No. And Wisconsin's better than them.
Yeah, it is interesting, though, because, like, Braden Locke he's struggled throughout his first start and a half, I guess you could say, or first game and a half that he played, and then all of a sudden started kicking on all cylinders. He's passing the ball really well. He's proven to be very accurate. Their run game has completely taken off, which also helps the pass game, of course. I think it's going to be interesting to see how much pressure they can get on him because he's a little bit of a smaller quarterback, and those are some massive linemen at Wisconsin. So it's not easy to see. It sounds stupid to say out loud, but it's not easy to see over these guys when you're 5'10", 5'11", and your center's 6'5". Like, it is tough, but end of the day, I feel like if they create pressure, which they should, I think he'd be in a lot of trouble. And he hasn't really seen pressure these past 3 weeks.
Well, he's going to get the football out quickly. I think that I've seen metrics across social media that in Big Ten Conference, I think he might have the quickest catch, snap to throw time among the Big Ten. He's definitely top 3. So another situation where, Abdul Carter, denied Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant aren't getting home. That's not their fault. He's getting the football out in lightning speed to avoid the QB pressure, to avoid the sack. So what Penn State needs to do to counter that, press coverage, right?
Yep.
AJ Harris up on the line of scrimmage, Jalen Kimber, Zion, it doesn't matter. And I feel like when I look at that wide receiver cornerback matchup, AJ Harris is better than Will Pauling.
Yes.
Okay, Jalen Kimber is better than Vinny Anthony. Zion Tracy, you have Zachy Wheatley over the top. You have Jalen Reed kind of roaming around as that additional defensive back. Where is he going to be? You don't know. So if Wisconsin had a wide receiver that could take over a game, if Wisconsin had a field general quarterback, maybe not the best supporting cast, but somebody that said, you know what, I can spread the football around, I can extend plays, I can basically, I can ad lib. Braden Locke can't do that. Braden Locke this offense is one-dimensional because if you take away Tawee Walker, Braden Locke in this receiving core can't play from behind. So if Penn State builds a 10, 14 plus point lead, they win the game. Yeah. Wisconsin is not built to play from a 2-score deficit.
Flip side of things, and this is where it gets really interesting. I think Penn State just has to be able to run the ball. They need Nick Singleton fully healthy. That bye week should have helped a little bit.
Absolutely.
Katron Allen, they're bottom 4 in the Big Ten in rushing defense. So if you can get that run game going and establish that, it opens it's almost like the opposite. It just opens up everything in the pass game. Plus, they're not healthy really. They miss for the past 2 or 3 weeks. They've had 13 to 15 players on that availability report for Wisconsin. So it's a banged-up Wisconsin team. Penn State had a week or 2 weeks to prepare for this Wisconsin team, so I think it should be an easy matchup. So I kind of want to end on this. What is your kind of prediction for this one?
I say Penn State 30, Wisconsin 20, and that covers the spread, right? The initial spread opened up at 11. Like this could be, I might be splitting hairs. Like this could be 31-17, 31-20. I think it's in that. It is safe to say that Penn State gets 30 plus points.
Yes.
It's safe to say that Wisconsin gets around 17-20. Okay, so I'm just kind of playing the likelihood of this. The only way Wisconsin can win this game is that Penn State's offense just doesn't show up. They don't show up because Wisconsin's not going to get into a shootout with Penn State. They can't. If this game turns into a shootout, Penn State will quickly win by 2-3 scores. If this is a rock fight, because everybody that's predicting a Wisconsin victory has this 20-17, 24-21, right? That thing. Nobody's sitting here and saying, well, I think Wisconsin wins 38-35. Nobody's going to predict that because it is the unlikeliest possibility. Is it impossible that Wisconsin wins? No. Is it unlikely? Yeah, because Penn State is the most complete team that they've faced. They can run the ball. They can pass the ball. Their defense is top 10 in yards per carry. And yards per pass could be better, but that's because they just faced a USC team, right? I still think if Penn State's run defense, believe it or not, with a 4.25 is better than the pass defense in terms of what the stats tell us. But bottom line is Wisconsin, when they play teams that are complete and play complementary football, Alabama, USC to an extent, they lose by a lot. Penn State is another one of those teams. If Penn State was last year's team, absolutely. You could sit here and confidently predict an upset, and I would probably agree with you. But this isn't, everybody still looks at this Penn State team, oddly enough, as that 2023 Mike Yurcich-led team. It's almost like nobody understands that Andy Kotelnicki is calling plays. Drew Aller's in his third year of football. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen are in their third years of football. They have Julian Fleming. Trey Wallace is in another year of football. Tyler Warren's the best tight end in college football. So do you see my point here? It's just Penn State is a complete team. Wisconsin is not.
I got one more thing for you before we sign off here, and it kind of goes in hand with what you just mentioned about the offense. You actually tweeted about it. Andy Kotelnicki, future Oklahoma offensive coordinator? ? I saw that on the hot board, and I was
not happening. No.
Now to kind of double up with that one. Do you think he would ever leave for another OC spot, or is it just head coach or bust? Head coach or Penn State?
Well, you have to look at it this way. So he's uprooted his life, his family to move to Pennsylvania. Do you really want to do that after one season? Just for a lateral move? And maybe when it comes to his actual contract change, it's going to be considered. So he gets a $25,000 raise. Is it really worth it to move your family again after 1 year for maybe the difference of $50,000 or $100,000? Probably not. I think
I
what
mean,
Andy
for us.
okay,
Yeah,
exactly.
you know what? Where?
It's relative. So Andy Kotelnicki is making about $1.5 million at Penn State. Is Oklahoma really going to break out the pocketbook and write a $3 million, $4 million check for an offensive coordinator? No, they're not going to. They might say, hey, we can offer 1.6, 1.7. I don't think that's enough to say, all right, I've had my time in Happy Valley. I'm good. Let's do that. Let's move all over again, find more housing, put the kids in a new school, move the wife to a new home. Like that, those things matter. But what can change your mind is when, I don't know about a Power 4 school. I've said that, oh, Andy Kotelnicki could land in the ACC and the Big 12. Probably not, because he has no head coaching experience. He has zero to no, he has no head coaching experience. He only has OC experience. So a Power 4 school is not going to take a chance on somebody with all this conference realignment. More dollars are at stake. Andy Kotelnicki is going to have to go to a MAC school, a Group 5 school, and prove that he can win in 2-3 years, and then a Power 4 school will take a chance on him. But again, that it has to be a head coaching job, and it has to be a raise, and it has to be a place where he can succeed. He's not going to go take over, I don't want to say Akron because Joe Moorhead's there, but like a Wyoming, for example. He's not going to go to Wyoming where he probably more or less can't succeed. It's got to be a program that has shown we will be all in on you with respect to where we are in Group 5, because programs, like he wouldn't go to Kent State, he wouldn't go to Akron, because then that's how you sabotage your up and coming career.
Yeah, that's where I find it interesting too. Like, what outweighs one another? Is it a Power 4 OC job better than a G5 head coaching job now? Because we've seen
Kelly.
Yeah,
we've seen Chip Kelly.
There you go. Yeah, we've seen it this offseason too, specifically because like Buffalo's head coach left for Alabama. There was another G5 school's head coach that left for another SEC program. It's getting to the point where a Power 4 job, assistant or offensive coordinator job, might be higher than a G5 head coaching job.
With all the headaches that come with being a head coach, NIL, transfer portal, you have to constantly. I will go back. Like James Franklin is good at his job because he is able to do, when he is the CEO of a football program, he is able to act as a liaison for everything. Donors, recruiting, NIL, offense, defense, quarterback. Like he has his hand everywhere. He has his, and that's, and a head coach, like you can't, as a head coach in college football, you cannot, and Tom Allen's even admitted this. He's like, I felt like I was getting away from coaching football, and that's not what I wanted to do. Well, James Franklin likes that he gets to do everything. So it's not for everyone. So you kind of have to balance that out. And so James Franklin is actually the perfect, one of the perfect coaches for modern day college football.
Yeah, you really are a CEO / athletic director at this point. You are running the show.
You're a co-athletic director. Him and Pat Kraft are co-athletic directors of the football team. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely insane. Zach, I know where to find all your stuff, but tell the listeners where they can find it.
I appreciate that, Richie. Locked On Nittany Lions, available on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Daily podcasts every day, Monday through Friday, with live streams and bonus content and interviews across the board for football, basketball, and wrestling.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Zach. For me and Zach, that's another episode of the Penn State 365 podcast. Signing off.